Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number whatever, doesn't matter. We get lost in the numbers, it starts to become unimportant. Have a look at your iPhone, you'll see where we are, who knows. Another guest on the show. Today's show we're going to take a kind of health angle. You know, I'm a big fan of health. We're going to take a simplicity angle, we're going to take a balance angle, we're going to take a kind of health hack angle. So we're going to kind of look at someone who's been on a very incredible journey themselves, someone that's had a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of kind of pro status and a lot of probably low status, as he might call it. And as always, we're going to try and learn from that. We're going to get inside this guy's head, understand the journey, understand what we can take away from it, and hopefully become more awesome ourselves. So from Canada, today's guest, Yuri Elkaim.
Elkaim, you got it, buddy.
we just went over that before we started, and I butchered it.
Yeah.
I was still in awe because before we started, Yuri said, Ben, where are you based? And I was like, Ipswich, Suffolk. It's kind of like East of London by about an hour. And he's like, oh yeah, I know Ipswich well. I used to train there as a goalkeeper and stuff. So I was like, whoa, small world.
Yep. I mean, yeah, like soccer or football, as it's really known, was my whole life up until I was 24. So I spent a lot of time. I played professionally in France. I trained a lot with a lot of the goalkeepers in the Premiership in England as well. So it's awesome memories.
I just did an interview today with I don't know whether it was going to come out before or after the show, but I did an interview with someone called Nick Littlehays, who's called the sports sleep coach.
Nice.
And as we were doing the interview, he kept name dropping basically every big name in football. He was like Alex Ferguson, Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, all these people.
Never heard of them. Yeah.
I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
I can't do that. Anyway, Yuri, let's get some background on you as a person. You've obviously evolved into being a healthcare practitioner on multiple levels. You are very much like me. In the online space, you're helping people with their health and their nutrition, their education. Give people some background. What's been your journey? What got you into this, and where are you at today?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my whole goal from probably about the time I was 10 years old was to play pro soccer. So when I was 10, I realized I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I should commit to this. And I did that for my whole teens. It was I put in my 20,000 hours, I think. And I was able to play professionally for 3 years. I played over in France with Lille, and it was awesome. But the dilemma was that I was really fit and active, but that was a mask for what was really happening to my health. Because I often tell people, don't confuse fit for healthy, because that's the mistake that I made. Because I suffered with really low energy. I was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night. I had really bad asthma in my earlier teens that eventually subsided. I had really bad eczema and a lot of digestive issues. And I didn't really pay attention to any of that stuff until I was 17 years old, where in my last year of high school, my hair started falling out of the blue. And I had, just to give you some context, my dad's Moroccan, so I naturally had a lot of hair, like bushy eyebrows, a lot of hair on my arms and legs and on my head. And in the space of 6 weeks, all of that was gone. It just literally just fell off.
Wow.
And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And, to no surprise, the medical doctors that I was seeing had no answers. They said, listen, you have an autoimmune condition called alopecia. We don't know why it happens, but there's really not much we can do other than inject your head with cortisone. And I was like, no, it's not going to happen. So 17, couldn't find the answers I was looking for. So I kind of did my thing, played soccer, went to university, studied kinesiology and health sciences. And when I was 24, when I decided to kind of retire, if you will, from soccer, I came back to Toronto to study holistic nutrition. A series of events led me to this specific school. On the first day of that school, I was blown away by what I was learning, because at 4 years at one of the top universities in the world, I had never learned this stuff. And I was studying health, nutrition, and human sciences. And I was like, what? This is crazy. So I asked one of my professors, who was a naturopathic doctor, I said, listen, do you think that all of my issues, like the hair loss and everything else, could be related to my diet? Because leading up until that point, my diet was terrible. Lots of breads, pasta, cereals, processed foods, microwave dinners. very few vegetables and fruit. And she said, absolutely, we see it all the time. And I was like, what? How's no one ever told me this?
Mm.
And it was a huge epiphany because I was like, so you're telling me that I could actually kind of fix this a little bit? And she's like, yeah. So in the course of the next couple of weeks and months of going through this school, what I was learning was just like every single day I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So I was applying it, started to feel a big difference. The first thing I noticed was amazing amounts of energy. And just to give everyone some context as to what I was doing is basically moving away from a processed diet, removing a lot of the allergenic foods like gluten, dairy, and a lot of the sugar that I was eating, and replacing it with whole foods, right? Eating cleaner whole foods, more alkaline foods, a lot of vegetables, more juicy, more raw foods. And in the space of about 2 months, I regrew all my hair. In much sooner than that, my energy was through the roof. I had much better mental focus. I wasn't having to sleep as much. And I just felt like I was on top of the world. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, well, where did the hair go? Because you don't have any hair right now. And that's a really valid question because I went through about 7 years, or I would say about 6 or 7 years of having the hair kind of come back. There's a lot of YouTube videos and pictures of me with that. And then about 3.5 years ago, I went to the doctor with my first son, and she's like, "Why don't you, while you're here, why don't you just get a tetanus shot?" And I was like, "Okay." And I'm not a believer in vaccinations. None of our kids are vaccinated. But for whatever reason, I was like, yeah, I might as well just get a tetanus shot because I apparently need one. So 2 weeks later, after getting the tetanus shot, my hair started falling out again.
No
And
way.
I was like, I couldn't, at the time, I didn't realize what was going on. It took me like 3 years to be like, why did my hair start falling out again? And that was the big culprit because it just sent my immune system into a craze all over again. But anyways, that journey of kind of health and pro soccer and kind of my recovery and all that stuff was a real big impetus for me to do what I do now. Because I'm like, if I didn't know this stuff, having gone to one of the top schools in the world, having played pro soccer, having worked as a strength and conditioning coach at the University of Toronto for 7 years, working with thousands of high-level athletes, there must be millions of people who don't know this stuff. And so I made it I just knew that I didn't want to work as a one-on-one trainer or a coach. And I was like, I want to get this message out to a lot of people. And that's where the internet came about. I had no idea what I was doing for the first couple of years, but eventually figured it out. And since then, we've helped 500,000 people. Got 3 published books, New York Times bestselling author, 21 million views on YouTube. It's been a pretty amazing ride. So I've taken, what I love about our space is that a lot of people take their own health journey and that kind of morphing to help other people, which is why I love working with so many people like yourself and other people in our space, because we're all coming from a really, really genuine place of wanting to serve others. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
Wow, what a journey. You must be right pissed off with your doctor who gave you that tetanus jab. I mean, not anymore. You've obviously bedded that, but...
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, she was so kind of like pleasant and happy. It's just like, it was almost like, oh, while you're here, let's just get a shot. Like it was like nothing for them, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about it. And it was, whatever. There could be worse things that happen, right? It's only my hair. So.
You talked about food and kind of inflammatory foods and gluten and various things. We know the more common allergenic foods. I'm currently going on another elimination diet because of seeking basically some more help. So I know that I'm not good with dairy. Can't have dairy. Used to be bad with gluten. As I thought that was not the case. Wasn't getting all my old symptoms with gluten. I used to get, digestive discomfort, really bloated, horrible bowels, kind of lethargy. And then I was going through a bout where I just didn't have as much energy as I used to. My girlfriend, she can't eat gluten or dairy either. She was like, I bet it's the gluten. You shouldn't be eating it. I was like, nah, don't feel anything. And because there was never a pattern, whereas IBS, you eat something 2 hours later, you get bloated. It's quite instant. So I went back and got tested, and the guy was like, yeah, you should be eating gluten. And then a load of random things like quinoa came up and things like that. And I've been gluten-free as of this podcast for like 6 days. And I've just noticed the amount of energy my brain has again. I've just, you don't realise it because you slowly slip out of it. You slowly lose kind of function. And it's been a real eye opener. And my digestive function was not bad, but it does feel better. My abs feel tighter. My core almost feels like it wants to work better. What for you do you have to avoid? Are there kind of some big stuff you have to avoid, some weird stuff? Because ultimately we can be intolerant to anything, right?
Sure. For me, like actually very similar. This is the tricky part for a lot of people is that if you have bread or gluten in any variety, you don't feel it right away. And that's the tricky part with sensitivities is that a sensitivity can show up to 4 days later. So it's like you feel crappy 4 days from now. How do you attribute that to what you had 4 days ago? So it's really tricky. And that's why like getting, you can get tested for the HLDQ gene, which will let you know if you have a sensitivity to gluten genetically. And if you do, you're probably best off avoiding it. Or you can do other things, whether it's an elimination diet to look at, I feel like crap when I'm having bread and I feel better when I'm not. And that's, for me, it's very similar symptoms as what you talk about, where I don't respond to bread in a way where I feel like, oh my God, I have to go to the bathroom right away, or I feel bloated. I don't get any of that. What I do get is a little bit of brain fog. I feel a little bit more tired than usual. And the biggest thing that I notice is a craving for bread. And I tell people, I'm like, listen, when you crave food, that is one of the hallmark signs of an addiction. Not just an addiction, but an intolerance or a sensitivity to that food. So if you're constantly craving bread or pasta or gluten in general, that is one of the signs that there could be a sensitivity. And obviously there are components like the gluteomorphins in breads and pastas that literally do stuff to your brain like opioids do to have you crave them. So there's all that side of thing. But for me, it's not like a full-blown, I have to go to the bathroom because I've got diarrhea. Everyone responds differently. That's the tricky part. So my best advice is do an elimination diet, some type of cleanse or whatever, where you're reducing or eliminating those foods, or let's just say gluten in this case, for 7, 14, 30 days. Notice how you feel, because most people don't understand or don't realize how good they can feel because they've simply been slowly poisoning their body for years. And until they remove things like that, or like caffeine and stuff, and really feel how good they can feel, it's tough to really know what's out there. So remove the food for a little bit, introduce it back in, and by that point, you'll know that, wow, okay, I've been avoiding this for 30 days or even a week, and now I've just had a piece of it again, and I really notice it. And that's when you start making those decisions yourself to be like, wow, this doesn't work for me. I don't like the way I feel compared to how I felt without it. So that's typically how I do it, and those are some of the symptoms that I've experienced over the years.
The problem with some of this, and we've talked about intolerances, gut health on this podcast probably about 25 times in the last 180 episodes, so it's something the users are very familiar with. I think some of the hard things to make people think about is that those kind of really small factors, because for me, with my recent gluten thing, is that, like you, I was getting this brain fog, but there was no correlation, and it was just a case of like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I'd just be like, God, I just don't want to work anymore, and that's all gone. Like I can happily sit here and work 14 hours for a day, and it not bother me. With some of the other stuff, and you mentioned eczema, and I had eczema as a kid, and it seemed to be heavily linked to dairy when I was a kid. And the problem with skin conditions is you have to remove the food for a long time to see the skin heal up right, because the skin takes so long to heal itself.
Yep. Dairy for me is, I notice dairy more than I do gluten. So for instance, if I have pizza, it's tough to say, well, was it the cheese or was it the bread? Who knows? Mm-hmm. But if I have an ice cream, I can definitely feel like a plugging sensation in my ears. So it's almost like there's phlegm buildup in my body. I'm not 100% dairy free all the time, but especially in the summertime where you want to have the occasional ice cream or gelato with the kids. But that's something that I'm definitely more cognizant of. If I have milk or if I have dairy, that I'll feel digestively pretty immediately. And also if I go off, if I'm on vacation or something and I decide to have a bit more dairy than I normally do, I'll start to notice my eczema come up a little bit more. So those are, for me, dairy is probably more pronounced than gluten is.
So let's sidestep that, because we've talked about loads in this podcast. I want to pick up on some topics that you like to speak about. I was going through some of the information on your website, and there's kind of some trends in what you get fired up about. And one of them is about you're a big fan of simplicity in your life, as am I. I mean, I promote living an awesome life, and simplicity in my eyes goes hand in hand with that. Otherwise, life becomes more complicated. How do you try and get or inspire simplicity in other people, and what does simplicity mean for you, and what is the effect of living a simple life?
Yeah, so I'm not saying that you have to live in like a tent in the middle of nowhere to like that degree of simplicity. What I really try to get across to people is that I've noticed that most people, because of the information age, are completely overwhelmed with information, right? They listen to this podcast, they listen to another podcast, there might be conflicting points of view, right? And when you compound that with magazines and diet books and websites and different experts saying different things, it becomes very confusing for the average person. And it was so for me for a long period of time until I went back to school to study nutrition, because what I learned during that time were the fundamentals, like principles that don't change. If you're a human being, there are principles that do not differ from person to person. Certainly there are things like gluten and dairy that might be different from person to person, but there are fundamental ideas about how food operates in our body that if everybody knew about, it would give them kind of a machete to chop through the jungle of nonsense that's out there. So what I try to do for people is really give them, I try to teach them how to fish as opposed to just giving them the fish, so that when they have a conversation with their doctor about blood sugar issues and their doctor says, listen, you should get on metformin. And they're like, well, I don't think I need to do that. Just like my doctor recommended I should get a tetanus shot. If I had thought about it for a second, I would have said, listen, I don't really think I need to do that, because recent research has actually shown that there's no benefit to getting a tetanus shot every 10 years. Actually, every 30 years is now the recommendation. So, I mean, there's things that change all the time, but if I can empower people to give them a better owner's manual of how their body works, just like we have an owner's manual for our car, they're able to make better decisions and sift through a lot of the complexity and confusing information out there. So for me, that's what I do really well, is I take the complexity and I make it very simple for people to understand. So if someone has questions about diabetes, well, let's understand how diabetes works in a very simple to understand manner, so you can make better choices and understand the implication of those choices. When it comes to living life, I'm a huge believer in, kind of from an exercise perspective, like minimum effective dose, because having played pro soccer, having trained thousands of athletes, I've seen what too much does. It's like, it drives me crazy. Like when I see commercials or infomercials promoting these insane workouts where it's like, go, 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 sweat it out. You got to kill yourself 7 days a week. And I'm like, yes, you'll get great results doing that, but that's impossible to sustain for any length of time beyond several months. And most people don't understand this. And it's like driving your car. If you drive your car millions of miles, like the thing's going to fall apart. Your body is the same thing. It's the same way. The more we use it, the more wear and tear occurs. There's more free radical damage, and it basically just accelerates the decay, aging, breakdown process. So getting people to understand that, listen, for just talking about weight loss for a second, losing weight is not about exercising more and eating less. There are physiological things happening inside of you at a hormonal level that are going to facilitate losing weight or stop you from losing weight. If you burn your body out and your adrenals are toast and if your thyroid doesn't function anymore, you're not going to lose weight no matter what you do. So you have to understand that it's about exercising more intelligently, and whether that's simplified or not is maybe a little bit of a different conversation, but it's about taking away all the more is better conversation to really get people to understand that, listen, you have to understand that it's not about doing more, it's about doing the right type of exercise in smaller doses to give your body that impetus, that initial stimulus for it to adapt and change on its own. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I really try to get people to think about, and hopefully it simplifies their lives, in the process. But again, if they're listening to 30 different people, there's going to be all sorts of conflicting points of view. So I do my part to hopefully simplify their lives, but we'll see.
Yeah, I always recommend that when people are kind of considering how to define the things that they're reading and listening and watching online, to kind of pick maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 voices that have this kind of common theme in them, like whole foods, get to bed on time, all the stuff that we know is true, and pick your favorite 5, 6, 7, and just follow their work, because these guys are going to always be in we'll call it 80% factual, all the stuff that we know is true. And then they're all going to be discussing and throwing out random 10, 20% on, have you thought about this? Maybe look at this. Because if we start looking at polar opposites, you're constantly going to be somewhere in the middle, just spinning your wheels and not knowing where to go. So it sounds kind of a bit boring and unsexy, but when you are looking for information online, you want to find people that are saying very similar stuff, because the chances are they're all right.
Yeah, and you said something that's really important, which is boring and unsexy, which is the complete opposite of what, for instance, the publishing space or marketing wants us to do. Because I've published 3 books with Rodale, Hay House, and they're not looking for just eat more real foods, because that's been said 1,000 times. Like any product that's coming to market, the marketing is the most important component of it. So these big publishing companies that are publishing book after book after book after book that you see on the store shelves or on Amazon, they're all looking for, what's the one unique hook here? How do we take a common idea and how do we add a little twist to it so that it seems like it's brand new? So that people are like, okay, maybe this is the one that's going to work for me. And it's really, really frustrating to be part of that animal, because you want to put out content that supports people's lifestyle and does so in a really congruent manner. And I'm happy that the stuff that I've put out is not like faddish or quick fix nonsense. But there's a lot of stuff out there that's like, listen, there's a couple studies that show that grapefruits help with whatever. So then now we have this grapefruit diet, or like raspberry ketones and stuff like that. It's just it's very, very frustrating. And if we look at shows like Dr. Oz, I don't know if you guys get that over in the UK.
Fortunately not.
What's that?
Fortunately not.
Yeah, well, I mean, for them, I think he's done a really good job at opening people's eyes to natural health. But the problem with that kind of stuff is that it's a content machine. They're publishing a show 5 days a week, and eventually you run out of content. And I've been on Dr. Oz, and I've gone through the pitching process to Dr. Oz. And I remember sitting in the office with their producers, and I had 5 cue cards that I prepared with like cool animation graphics and stuff for them about different ideas for a segment. And their single most important question was like, okay, we've done this before. We need something new and unique and different. And so it's all about coming up with new spins and different hooks. And that's fine from a marketing and kind of eyeball perspective, but for the consumer, it can become very confusing, overwhelming. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It is. Let me talk about kind of the morning routine. And this is something that I've touched on briefly on the podcast. I don't think we've been there a bit. But this is something that you've talked about with your audience before. I've noticed that you've got a couple of blogs on it. You're obviously a big fan of getting the morning routine right. What does your morning look like, and how can people tweak theirs to be more productive, be more rewarding? Because I think we get caught into patterns that are not quite conducive to living the best day that we could.
Oh, it's the morning. I don't know anybody that doesn't feel better and more accomplished when they've gotten up early in the morning and gotten something done. Now, that's not the same to say that when you get up, I get up at 5 in the morning. Initially, if you're getting up that early, it's like you don't feel like amazing right away, right? Like that's you might feel a bit groggy, a bit like, oh, I want to go back to bed. But the feeling you get for that initial few hours when nobody else is awake is unbelievable. That's like, you can't replace that with anything else. And it's like the pain of discipline is far greater than the pain of regret, or far less than the pain of regret. And it's one of those things where if I sleep in until like 7:30, I'm like, shit, I just missed out on my magic time. And I've got 3 boys under 5.5 years old. So they get up at 7. For me, it's like, I have this constraint where it's like, if I get up at 5, I have 2 hours to start my day on the right foot. And for me, that basically involves a 15-minute meditation. Then I do my most important work. So I'll spend about an hour to hour and 20 minutes doing my most important work for that day. And then just before about 7 o'clock, I'm doing about 15 minutes of yoga, dynamic mobility, soft tissue work, just to kind of limber my body up. By the time the kids come down, we spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours together, make some breakfast, get their lunches ready, get them out the door to school, take my dogs for about a 30-minute walk, come back, get my day started, and they're done by 3 o'clock. So my day has to be done by 3. We don't go to the gym anymore because I can't stand driving to a gym, especially in Toronto. It's a pretty busy city. So we turned our garage into a home gym. It's like everything we need, Olympic lifting platform, squat rack, kettlebells, the whole bit. So I'll take about half an hour a few times a week just to work out in my gym later on in the afternoon. And that's kind of my day. But the key is that morning time. Like that morning time is huge because that's when we're most creative. That's when we have the most energy. Not energy in the sense of like, I feel amazing as soon as I get out of bed, but like the mental energy. Because most of us will recognize that by later in the day, it's like your smartphone, right? The battery just kind of goes down as you use it. The same thing with our willpower and discipline and mental juice is that the more we're doing throughout the day, the more that goes down over time. So if we can use the morning time to get our most productive work done, you could literally be done your day, hours in advance. I technically could be finished my day work-wise at 7 in the morning if I really wanted to. If I just wanted to kind of chill and do nothing, 7 a.m. would be good for me. But that's why it's so important to get that most important work done first thing, because if you leave the most important stuff to like later in the afternoon, then you've got less mental energy, you're less creative, you're less motivated to get that done. So morning time is huge.
Yeah, I love it. I roughly get up 5:30, and if I get up later, I do sit there. My day just doesn't go quite as well. There's not as much momentum behind it. And you're right. There's a weird sense of incredible freedom when doing your own thing when no one else wants you or needs you or the world's not alive. And I do love that feeling.
I know. That's why I love I don't like New York City necessarily because it's so busy and crazy. The time that I like New York City the best is Sunday morning, where everyone's recovering from the night before. There's no one out of the streets. You can go for a walk or a little run or something, and it's just it's quiet. It's like New York City is chill. And then you get around 11 a.m. and then it starts picking up again. But that morning time is really special.
Nice. Well, consider your morning routine, folks. So when I was sifting around on your website again, you were talking about something that is quite close to me, and that's kind of caffeine and very much modulating it more than anything in your lifestyle. You look like you live a low caffeine lifestyle as well. Why is that? What's your experience and history with caffeine? Do you have particular views around it? And what is your kind of education around caffeine?
Yeah, so caffeine is I feel like we're living in the twilight zone sometimes. I thought you were chugging a bottle of vodka for a second there.
It's a wine bottle. Everyone asks that.
Nice. So I feel like we live in the twilight zone when I talk about this sometimes because so many people they're just so caffeinated or hooked on the idea of caffeine that it's tough for them to consider another possibility. And it's funny, even when I post this stuff on my Facebook wall, I'll have my own audience be like, oh, I just found this study talking about the benefits of caffeine. I'm like, wow, you're really that far down the rabbit hole where you're actually going out to PubMed and finding your own research supporting your own philosophy about why you should drink coffee. And that's totally fine. My thing is that energy for me has been everything since the fact that, I was pretty low in energy for most of my life. And when I was the first time I drank coffee was when I was playing soccer in France. I had a teammate who was Croatian, and he introduced me to espressos and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I'll never forget the first experience. I remember we sat down at a cafe. We had training later that day. And I remember getting to training, and I was like, my body felt so foreign to me. It was so jittery and uncomfortable. And I was like, this is not good. I don't want to feel like this. Now, naturally, he's like, don't worry, it goes away over time. So we had a couple more espressos over the coming weeks, and my body habituated to that. So I was drinking, maybe the odd espresso a couple times a week when I was in France. I came back to Toronto, studied holistic nutrition, started to learn about caffeine and what it does. And I was like, I'm not too sure this is really good for me because what we have to understand is that our adrenal glands are these two little walnuts on top of our kidneys, right? And they basically help our body deal with stress. Now, when we're emotionally stressed, physically stressed, toxins coming into our body, any kind of stress, they're going to pump out epinephrine, adrenaline, or cortisol, right, as this kind of fight or flight response to deal with stress. Now, the problem is that caffeine is a stimulant, which is a form of stress on the adrenal glands. So when you drink caffeine, that initial high you get is adrenaline from the adrenal glands being pumped out into the bloodstream. Now, that goes away over time, which basically means you need more of the initial drug to get the same effect. And that's why caffeine is the #1 drug in the world without most people knowing it. Because if you think about it, you need more of it to get the same initial effect that you once had. If you go off it, you start getting withdrawal symptoms. Those are 2 hallmark signs of an addiction according to the DSM-4, which is the kind of the Bible for psychological disorders and addictions. And, it's so funny because, again, most people think about caffeine as this thing they need to have to feel functional. And it's like we talked about earlier, they don't know how good they can feel if they were off the caffeine. Mm-hmm. So what I've, not that I'm like, I give people the option. I'm like, listen, I'll be very honest with you. I still drink coffee, but it's decaf, and I don't have it all the time. So if you love the taste of coffee, and if you want to continue that, that's fine. Just move to a decaf and start to look at other alternatives for, whether it's an herbal tea or a green juice or a smoothie or whatever it is, to start really nourishing your body through nourishment instead of stimulation. Because, caffeine is a stimulant, and yes, it will make you feel good initially, but it's followed by a crash. And there are a couple reasons for that. First of all, it does that to the adrenal glands, so you get that adrenaline pump out. But also that impacts your blood sugar. So caffeine, because adrenaline is going to break down stored glycogen, it's going to raise your blood sugar. So you have this initial high in blood sugar for that fight or flight response. But the problem, again, is that is quickly met by a lot of insulin, which is going to take all that sugar out of your blood, leaving you in a sugar coma. So you feel like a zombie for a little bit, and then you feel like you need that sugar fix or that caffeine fix to come back to life. And that's why a lot of people who have blood sugar issues end up having several cups of coffee throughout the day, because it's just like they have to have it in order to maintain like their baseline functioning. So, I've seen this, I've worked with so many people to see what caffeine does, and considering that most people already have some level of adrenal fatigue, when you add caffeine on top of that, on top of the other stimulation from life and the stress from life, it's just a lethal concoction for just draining yourself out over time. And it's really a Band-Aid that gives us very temporary relief, and we think, we need it to function. So that's what I think about it. And I wrote extensively about this in my first New York Times bestselling book, The All Day Energy Diet. And it's amazing what people can experience within a couple of days of getting off caffeine. And obviously there's that withdrawal, and you feel kind of crummy for the first couple of days, but then it's like, wow, I didn't know how good I can feel when I start to actually nourish my body instead of stimulating it.
I'm a very similar opinion. I don't have any caffeine in my diet apart from before the gym. I take it as a performance aid, and that's it. If I'm in a real sticky situation, I might have been doing loads of traveling, really sleep deprived or something, then I'll use it because it's going to help me function a bit better. But otherwise, it's like it's not in my diet. Like, I manage my energy through sleep, good practices, not having too much stress. Because I agree, I just habitually, it's just something that's crept into our lifestyles and just takes over, and then people just don't feel normal without it. Yeah. Okay, my kind of last question of today. You're very much someone that's kind of slowly hacked their lifestyle, their body, that kind of stuff. So as someone that really seeks optimal health and kind of hacking your lifestyle, I'm interested to know what your kitchen looks like. Like, what gadgets do you have? How do you go about your nutrition? I want people that are listening to maybe take away one or two interesting things from kind of how you set up your kind of nutritional diet side of your lifestyle.
Well, if I had a portable device here, I would take you up to the kitchen, but I'll just describe it for you. So I'm a huge believer in that environment will always trump willpower. So first rule of thumb in our kitchen has to be spotless, like no crap anywhere. Kitchen, like the countertops are clean, and you basically have a clean, space in which you can think in. Because a lot of people live in a kitchen that's just a disaster. And it's like, if you got chips and cookies laying around, that in of itself is bad because they're very accessible to making poor food choices. So our kitchen is very clean. We try to do our best to remove any kind of junk from coming into the house. Aside from that, a couple supplements that we use. One is obviously a good probiotic, fish oil, digestive enzymes, and then I have a greens powder that we have that we formulated ourselves. So that's pretty much my supplement regime. Other than that, it's really like fresh whole foods, right? So we've got a couple bowls of fresh apples, bananas, avocados, mangoes, all that good stuff. In the fridge, we've got a bunch of frozen salmon, some chicken, some ground sirloin in the kind of in the deep freeze, so that we can kind of take it out when we need to. And the fridge, for the most part, is like it's not a very North American fridge. Like, not a lot of people in North America buy for the entire week or for 2 weeks and just store everything in the fridge because they have such a big fridge. I know in Europe it's a bit different, where it's smaller size fridges. People buy more fresh stuff on a regular basis. So for us, we actually end up doing that a bit more. So we'll go probably a few days. So we'll probably go shopping every 3 to 4 days and just kind of stock up what we need for that time. Because we've got 3 kids, the other thing is, how do we prepare meals that are really simple for them to have either for lunch or when they get home? So we'll make things like chili. I just made chicken soup last night. So we'll make big batches of that, and then we'll just keep it in Tupperware in the fridge. That will give us a good 1 to 2 week supply of like ready to go stuff. And so it's really basic stuff, really simple, just whole foods, just buying fresh produce several times a week. No dairy, bread occasionally. That's pretty much as simple as it is. You
mentioned earlier about sort of smoothies, juices. Are you a fan of kind of juicing and that kind of stuff?
Yes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I'm a huge fan. Like, I think the best investment any of us can make is getting a Vitamix or like a really good blender. I've had my Vitamix for 12 years now. So it's like, it's paid off like several times. So we'll make smoothies at least once a day, either in the morning or when the kids get home from school, just packing a ton of nutrition right in the glass. Juicing, I'm still a huge fan of, and we've got a couple juicers, and it's funny because I actually don't juice really anymore. Like I used to spend like an hour juicing a whole batch for several days. Then I'm like, what am I doing this for? I'm wasting my time. So now we'll just get like fresh pressed juice delivered to our front door, because there's some amazing juice companies in Toronto that'll deliver to your door. I'm like, you know what? Like, my time's more valuable than spending an hour or two juicing. I'm just going to order it and have it delivered to our door. So I love juice. I'm a huge believer in green juice, not fruit juice, but vegetable juice. And one of my rules, like my kind of daily rules, is 1 liter of greens every single day. So whether that's a smoothie, a green juice, or my greens powder and water, that has to happen every single day. So Vitamix juicer is optional. Food processor we have. And then just, a good stovetop, good oven. That's, pretty basic stuff.
Fair enough. I just wanted to get a little insight into kind of what happens in the home, especially with children and stuff, because I think people are always interested in that. Mm-hmm. Yuri, thanks a million for being on the show. Let's point people to be able to come and find you on your websites and social media and stuff. So let us know where people can find you.
Sure. I think the easiest place is just my blog, yurielkaim.com. And then from there, you can check out our content, our links to social media and so forth. So if you want to find me on Facebook, just type in Yuri Elkaim. If you want to find me on YouTube, same name. So it's pretty straightforward.
I think we need to spell this name, don't we?
Yeah, sure. That might help, because very few people can get it right. So it's YURIELKAIM as in Mary.com, and then the same name on social.
There we have it. Right, once this show comes out, drop me and Yuri a tweet or something, say something, ask a question. That's what we're here for. Me and Yuri are putting ourselves out there as educators, as people that can help. So take advantage of that. Ask a question, and we will help. Please go and check out Yuri's blog. Lots of really nice, simple, well-balanced information on his blog, so go and check that out. Great resource. Yuri, thanks again for being on the show. It's been lovely to talk to you and share your journey with other people.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
And for all of you guys listening, who knows what's going to be on next week? I just don't know. I'm backloading loads of podcasts. We're getting them in there. I'm making sure I'm ahead of myself so I'm not running around thinking, oh shit, I haven't thought about the podcast. So all of you guys, stay awesome, and I will see you on next week's show. Ciao. Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 186, I think. Who knows? So today is a very powerful